And it's burning really nice and the whole system is working great.
Hello, welcome to Waypoint Survival. Today I want to show you how to make a hobo tripod using a tin can and a wire hanger. Stay tuned.
For this project, you're going to need a few simple things as well as a few simple tools. First of all, you need a tin can of some sort. This had some beef stew in it. I did use a safety can opener to cut off the lid, that so it doesn't have any jagged edges for the project. However, you could use the can opener on your multi-tool, Swiss Army knife, or a P38 can opener if you have it. There are many ways to open a can. The important thing is that we need this lid. Most of the time we just throw it away, but this project uses the lid as well as the can. The next item that you're going to need is simply a large nail. 16 penny nail is probably best just because of the size and diameter, and it's a little easier to hold on to and work with. And this is something that you should carry in your kit all the time anyway, as it has a lot of uses. The next thing that you're going to need is just a simple wire coat hanger. And of course you can still find these in a lot of places, abandoned buildings, and any kind of wire actually will do, but this is pretty common and it's fairly easily found. Next you need a hammer or a hammer stone. You can even use a stick of a proper diameter and length to hammer with, because we're going to be pounding the nail in through the can, so that's helpful. The next item that I'm going to use is a cordless drill with a 1/2-inch drill bit. Now you don't have to use this in a survival or bushcraft situation. You could use something other than this, such as the nail that you had or anything to punch holes. And I'll demonstrate that here in just a little bit. Now before we get into this project, it's important to note, and I try to say this on all of my videos that use tin cans, inside this is a BPA lining, and that's plastic, which is not good for you. You do not want to cook anything in an aluminum can just over a fire. Years ago they would just punch holes in the top to let the steam escape and just set the can in the coals, but that's no longer a wise thing, as we know that BPA is really not good for your health. And so it's important to put this in the fire and burn all that out thoroughly. So here we have the can laid upon the coals. The fire is burning. Got a pretty good stiff little wind blowing right now, but anyway, when the can is done, it'll be blackened on the exterior, and you can tell where all the plastic has burned and peeled up on the inside as well, and I will show you that when it's done. So you can see here that the can is already starting to blacken, and you can see the plastic peeling up on the inside as it's starting to burn. It will actually catch fire and burn up, but it's important that you don't leave the can too long on a very hot fire, or you can melt the solder that holds the seams together. Just something to be wary of when you're doing this project. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to punch holes in this can. Now we have to find where the seam is, and I can tell it's right here, both inside and outside. Now I did scour this can out. You can do that with sand or dirt or grass or leaves, using some water. It's very important that you clean out all of that burnt plastic, that BPA. The other thing is this can will rust easy from dew and moisture, so a light coat of some kind of cooking oil will help preserve this for quite a long time. Alright, so finding where the seam is, I'm going to put a hole using the nail in exactly opposite sides. And it's very easy to do that. You just go down just maybe a 1/4 inch, something like that, into the can, and keeping the nail at an angle so I can pound it just like this. Alright, don't want to go in too far. Alright, so we've got that hole in the can, and then I want to take and I want to use the nail and I want to kind of wobble it out a little bit, make that bigger, and then I can use this hole to sight down in. Now the nail's not going to be long enough to reach the bottom, so I have to kind of look at it from the very top, and then I can see if it's lined up properly. So about right there, and then the other side, the exact same thing. Wobble the hole out a little bit. Alright, now this is going to be jagged, and you can leave it just like that. I mean, if you're a hobo, then that's just fine, but I like to take my multi-tool and take and just simply crimp those ends down all over that. Do that on both sides. And while it's still a little bit sharp, it definitely puts that down lower so that you don't always catch your finger on it and cut yourself. And that's just always It's always a smart thing to do, because cuts seem like a lot worse when you're in the backcountry than they do anywhere else. Alright, so there we go. The holes are made, and that looks pretty decent. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the wire hanger apart, and you can do this with pliers, or in this case, this wasn't a real thick hanger, so I could easily do it with my fingers. Now, what we want is we want to try and straighten this out, and trying to save as much of the length as possible. Now, I know you're going to have some curly ends here, one under the hook, one right here. That's not really going to hurt anything, but you do want to make sure that you try to straighten it out as much as possible, because that's really important for our project. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is there's a couple different ways to make a bail handle, and I'm just going to go with the cheapest and easiest way, which is just to cut off a length of wire and then just kind of form it into a bit of a U shape, just like this. So very, very simple. I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I've got another video, and I can post a link to it, where I show you how to make a handle that actually fits around the can. But anyway, we're just going to take this, and we're going to put just a small hook on the side. Just take this, and we're going to bend it like this until we have a little hook. And we're going to do that to both sides. I'm going to try to make this as even as possible so that we have a hook on each end. And then, of course, this is very, very simple to do. We're just going to put it in to these holes. It's always easier to do this when you're not doing it on camera. Alright, so I put it in there, and then using the pliers, we're just going to fold this hook over and crimp that in so that it stays in a lot tighter than it would normally. Alright, so now we have a halfway decent bail handle. And we don't want this too tall, but that's tall enough that we can still hold it, reach in and stir it, and that will work sufficiently. The next thing we want to do is we're going to take our nail and we're going to punch a hole right in the center of the lid. Just estimate the best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, so that's pretty close to the center, and might be off a little bit, but again, it's not that big a deal. This is just a Hobo quickie tripod hack. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to take the drill, and we are going to drill 3 holes. Alright, there's one, and then we're going to go over here, and the ribs make this very easy to do because of the design. So we'll do one there, I'm going to go one over here, there's 2, and the other one goes equidistant from these 3. Alright, as you can see, you want to be careful, it will want to spin around on you. Now we've got some sharp edges on here, and we can do the same thing to this that we did with our can. We just simply take some pliers. You could hammer this down with a rock. You can actually use the hammer if you wish to kind of flatten this out and just pound that down. That'll work fine as well. That's just another little quickie way of doing it. Alright, just like that. Okay, so this is what we're going to end up with, is something that looks like this. And you'll have to pardon the rooster in the background. He thinks it's morning. For the next part of the project, you need to get 3 small sticks, and you want to make sure that the end is either at or less than ½ an inch roughly, whatever your hole size you made in the top of the lid. And as far as lengthwise, they're just a little bit longer than armpit to fingertip. So something like that, equal lengths. A couple of these are just some junk wood that's growing around here. And so again, green sticks are best, and if you can, you want to use something that like a limb from a tree. Don't cut down a whole sapling for this, but again, you want green wood because it doesn't burn quite as well. And actually, if you're curious, the junk wood that I used is honeysuckle. So it's just a little honeysuckle tree. Again, it's a nuisance plant, so trimming it out is good for the property. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to trim off the bark, and depending on the diameter of your holes, that will kind of gauge how thin this needs to be. Again, you don't need to make it super thin, but just trim the bark off of all 3 of your sticks. So here we have all 3 of our sticks. We just skinned off the end, And sometimes it's best if you can leave a little bit of a limb protrusion here, a little bit of a knob. Didn't have that on this one, but that will also help with this process in case you shave this a little too thin. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our lid that we made and we're going to put it down in each one of these holes, down over top of the sticks, just like this. And this becomes our tripod holder. The next thing we want to do is we want to continue to use this hook from the hanger. We're going to bend it though and make it much smaller and therefore a lot stronger, because this is going to be holding our little pot over the fire. Alright, so we just set this over the fire like so, and you can crisscross these any way you wish. As far as the tripod is concerned, to lock them in, there's different ways that you can do that. But or you can just put them straight. It doesn't matter. Just all three of them at an angle, and that will hold everything quite steady. So just out like this, and there we go. So they will kind of twist together just like that. You can kind of see that arrangement, and it kind of does that all by itself. And that's a close-up of what it looks like once it's sitting over the fire and everything is kind of twisted naturally into place. Now you're going to need to measure this according to the length of your tripod, and I just measured mine, and so somewhere in here is the proper length for the hook to hang. Now you could leave this complete and just bend this over at the top to keep it from sliding through, and that'll work just fine, but we don't need all of this wire. Of course, wire is very useful, so what we're going to do is take the multi-tool and we're just going to clip that off, and we'll save this for another project perhaps. Alright, so we've got that. We do want to straighten that back out because again we're going to have to thread it back through the top. We've got a little bit of a fire going there, so let's go ahead and see how all of this works when we put it together and actually hang the can on it, and then you can see what the complete hobo tripod actually looks like. Now I just put some water in here to simulate either a stew, maybe some beans, whatever it could be, maybe a mulligan stew if you're actually a hobo. But it's important that you don't make this bail handle too long because again that affects our ability to raise and lower it over the fire. This isn't a very tall tripod. You don't want it super long, super tall, because again we're working with tin here. It can't support a huge amount of weight, and also these holes have to be not too large in diameter or it will weaken the lid. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and very carefully thread the end of this hook that we've made out of this wire up through the center of this can lid, making sure that we don't burn ourselves over the fire. Alright, just like that. The next thing we want to do is we want to find out where the can needs to sit over the fire depending on the height of the flame. So we're going to go ahead and hang that on there, and then we don't have a huge amount of room, so that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up a little bit, and I'm just going to put a simple 90-degree bend in the top there, and if you want you can go ahead and bend that over as well a second time, and that'll hold that can in place. I'll give you a close-up of what that looks like. So here's the first 90-degree angle that I bent, and I just lifted it up a little bit once I knew where I wanted the pot to hang. I lifted it up, bent it over to 90, and came over here and made another hand bent 90. The reason we did that is because as this gets warm, of course it's going to get softer, more pliable, and so we don't want this to just pull through. You could put a loop on there, you could do all sorts of things. But by doing it this way, we leave this extra length of wire hanging down here so that we can actually adjust the height. Now of course, you bend this back and forth, it's going to break. This can's not going to last forever. But this is just an excellent way to make a no-lash tripod from a single can and a little wire hanger. And there you have the whole system. You can see how it works, how it burns, and that's going to cook very well. It's going to be usable at least several different times. I would think if you took care of it, you could get somewhere between 10 and 15 cooking times out of this, perhaps longer, if you kept it oiled and cleaned and took care of it.
This is James Bender for Waypoint Survival. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also make sure and check out the links in the description box below. And while you're down there, you'll find our Patreon link. This is where you can donate to financially support the channel, and you can do so for as little as $1 a month, and a big thank you to everybody that's been doing so. You'll also find our spring link. This is where you can buy great Waypoint Survival branded merchandise. You'll also find our waypointsurvival.com link, and this is where you can sign up for great survival and bushcraft training classes. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. And when you do subscribe, make sure and press that bell button so that you can stay notified of all of our upcoming videos, and we'll talk to you next time.